Yeah, Krishna had been proceeding through chapters 17 and 18. He's been using the three gunas as his tool of analysis, if you like, to analyze the different element, facets, aspects of our lives. And in particular, last time, the last of the 11 series of analyses was happiness. And again, the continuing pattern that he was highlighting with sattva guna being related to renunciation, spirituality, acting without desire, rajas related to passion, activity, getting things done, acquiring things in this world, and tamas just incapacity, darkness, illusion. And I think the point should be made that these are not permanent states in any living being or in any one of us, and they're constantly fluctuating. So all of us are subject, or at times we can cultivate sattva, but also rajas will afflict us and tamas will afflict us as well. That constant fluctuation of mind and body between the gunas, the idea being that we try to transform ourselves in such a way that sattva is the predominant quality within our character. What and there was a question. Let's just move on a little bit. What Krishna is doing now is he's making a little bit of a transition with a slightly tenuous link, because what he's saying here is that the gunas, he wants to talk now about karma yoga, because he's beginning from verse 42, which is I think what we're starting off with today. He's beginning with his grand summarization of the main points that the Bhagavadgītā has made. And as he started out really in chapter 2 with karma yoga, chapter 2 verse 47 perhaps, karma yoga, acting in the world but without attachment. So he uses this guna idea to lead into that revisiting of the idea of karma yoga, by saying that all types of human being as designated by the varnas, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, are affected by the gunas. Our swabhav, on which the varna designation is based, are affected by the gunas. The swabhav is the inherent nature of a person, the character of a person, the tendencies, the abilities of a person. They're all part of our inherent nature, our swabhav, which makes a certain pattern of living most suitable for us. We're all drawn in different directions. We all have different abilities. And the question that I saw posted, I think it was Tushar actually asked this question: can you change your swabhav? And I was thinking about that. Excuse me. And yes, I think the answer has to be that yes, you can. And in fact, I will go further and say that swabhav is never a constant. It's constantly being changed. You're constantly transforming it on the basis of the thoughts you have, the experiences you have, and particularly the people you come in contact with, your association, your character can be changed. And I think that's demonstrated if we look back into some of the ancient texts I was thinking about. Look at people like Valmiki, for example. In his early life, he was a hunter. He killed animals. His swabhav was such that it impelled him to do such a thing. But then, after his experience, then he became the most enlightened Brahmin by Varna. So on the basis of that, all of us can have these mini Valmiki moments whereby our perhaps the type of swabhav that we wouldn't want, you can change it by your experiences and by your endeavours. I think that has to be the case. We're not the Gita is never, I don't think, totally deterministic. It accepts that we are born with certain proclivities, certain nature. That's never a constant. We can never sit back and say, well, that's it then, that's what I am what I am, and nothing I can change it, nothing I do. The leopard can't change its spots. That's me. That isn't the case. Swabhav can be worked upon, transformed by the experiences, the encounters, the environments we put ourselves into. If we put ourselves into rajasic places, then rajas will continue to influence our swabhav. If we put ourselves in a sattvic environment as much as possible, then sattva will greatly permeate into the swabhav. I think that's the answer. Anyway, back to the Varnas, and in these verses 42, 43 and 44, Krishna gives a very nice analysis, a clear, succinct analysis of what he means by these Varna tendencies. And again, I'll make the point, this isn't about caste, this is about the innate nature of different types of human beings, not necessarily what you're born with at all. So first of all, he starts off with those who are Brahmin by nature, and he gives then the qualities of Shamo, Damas, Tapaha, Shaucham, Shantir, Arjivam, Evacha, Ganam, Bigyanam, Astikyam, Brahmakarmas Svabhavajam. Okay. So the last line, Brahmakarma Svabhavajam. Brahmakarma means the activities that are performed by a Brahmin, and they are Svabhavajam. Jam as a suffix means born of, arising from Swabhav, from their inner nature. Now, one thing we'll notice, I think, as we go through that list is that they're not what we would normally think of as karma, as actions. They're more the attributes of consciousness, the states of consciousness that a person displays. I think again, why Krishna describes this as Brahma karma, the activities of a Brahmin, is because right throughout the Gita, the point is being made that action is always subsequent to a state of mind, and it's the state of mind that motivates the physical doing of the action, which is the most significant thing. So when Krishna delineates the Brahma karma, the actions of the Brahmin, he's really talking about the states of mind, the typical state of consciousness of such a person who is Brahminical, perhaps by tendency. Also, again, I made this point last week, but I think it's very, very significant that here, Bhagavadgītā, Krishna is saying that the topmost people in society, because the Brahmins, many places, these people with these tendencies are given the most elevated status, but that's because they have no desire for such status. They have no desire for the wealth, the opulence, the prosperity that comes normally with having high status in society. Just the opposite. They're totally disinterested in lining their own pockets from it. And that is an essential characteristic of the Brahma Swabhav, the inherent nature. It's a lack of avarice, a lack of personal desire, a commitment to enlightened wisdom rather than self. They're fully satisfied because the wisdom, the enlightenment brings far greater joy than any possession or prosperity or wealth can bring. So let's have a look at the list then. Shamaha, it means tranquility, equanimity of mind. It's the prasad state of mind, serenity, able to go through life with all its constant good and bad fortunes without being overly disturbed by them, without becoming angry by provocation, without becoming overly despondent. That equanimity, shamaha. So shamaha. Damas. Damas is self-control. And what that means really is that we are all subject to the pressure of our desires, the promptings of our senses, our changing moods. We maybe wake up in a bad mood, and people do things or say things that are agitating. And if there's a lack of dhammas, then there will become anger, agitation, irritation, harsh words, etc. But the person who is the Brahma Swabhav, the Brahmin Swabhav, is dhammas. He can recognize them, identify that is coming, and uses his buddhi, his intellect. I don't like that. I don't like being angry. Therefore, I'll stop being angry. I'll stop being irritated, because I have the power to turn it off. I'm not subject to these changing moods. I'm not subject to these desires. I can withstand and resist them. And that is dhamma, self-control, self-mastery. So shamo, dhammas, tapaha. Tapaha, that's the point I was making before. Tapa means austerity, tapas. I mean, often it means quite harsh acts of bodily austerity, fasts and things like that. But we will recall, perhaps, those who were tuning in some weeks ago, that Krishna redefined, I think that's fair to say, he redefined what tapas means as really just the way we interact with the world, showing respect to people who are worthy of respect, being restrained, not overly licentious, brahmacharya, ahimsa, never causing harm. That was the bodily tapas. And then tapas of the words is never speaking words that are harsh, unkind, painful, speaking words that are pleasing and beneficial. And then tapas of the mind is manaha prasadaha, serenity of mind. So Krishna, the Gita doesn't like the idea of these harsh bodily austerities. It follows the Buddha's view in that sense. It doesn't like these mortifications of the flesh that we sometimes read about in the early text Puranas in particular. And we see that it's quite condemnatory of them in the beginning, I think it's verses 4 and 5 or 6 of chapter 17. That is condemned as being not the proper way to proceed. So for that reason, tapas in the Bhagavad-gītā is completely redefined, and therefore, and the Brahmin manifests those qualities. That's again part of the Brahma Svabhav. So shamo, dhammas, tapaha, shaucham, kshanti, patient, tolerant. It's similar again. Insults may come, but there's no anger, just tolerate. It's just like that. I recall in the Mahabharata, or maybe one of the Puranas, the story of Vidur, after he's bitterly insulted by Duryodhana, just for the heinous crime of offering good advice about how to behave properly. Duryodhana absolutely insults him, says this fellow should be whipped and thrown out. It says then Vidur left his bow at the door and simply walked out. He wasn't angry, he simply observed the gunas interacting in the mind of Duryodhana, and particularly, one presumes, rajas and tamas. So in other words, kshanti, he's simply tolerant. People do bad things to us, people say bad things to us, but resist the pressures of anger and irritation. Patient and tolerance. Kshantir arjivamevacha. Arjivam means honesty, honesty of speech, honesty of deeds. So that if the Brahmin doesn't need any contract, he doesn't need any written guarantee or anything, if he says or she says, I will do this, I promise this, that's it, absolutely guaranteed. There's no going back on the word, there's no duplicity, no sleight of hand, absolutely upfront, truthful and honest. That is Arjivam. What a character is being portrayed here. These are the Brahma Karma Svabhavacha. Kshantir Arjivam Evacha, and also Jnanam Vijnanam Astikyam, Brahma Karma Svabhavajam. So the last three are Jnana, Vijnana and Astikya. Now, none of the commentators quite agree on what is meant by Jnana and Vijnana and what is the distinction between them. I can recall must be 10 years ago now, discussing it with it was actually Professor Narasimhachari, who was over from Oxford, about the meaning, and the different commentators have different things. Some say it's just knowledge, theoretical knowledge, and is jnana. Vijnana is spiritual enlightenment, which is higher than ordinary knowledge. I think in one of the translations I've got, it says knowledge and special knowledge. For what it's worth, I think, and this relates to the way that the Bhagavad-gītā works as well, I think jnana is knowledge in an intellectual sense, knowing the truth, and vijnana is practical knowledge, which means knowledge of the actions that one should take, the spiritual wisdom and spiritual action, if you want, like Sankhya and yoga, another way of looking at it. And that's what I think is meant by jnanam and vijnana. But as I say, there's no absolute agreement on that point. And astikyam is faith, belief, that this faith in the Gita, if you like, astikya, as opposed to nastikya, who are the atheists and non-believers. So the expectation is that the Brahma Karma Svabhavajam includes a belief in the value, the inherent value of spiritual wisdom, a commitment to that spiritual wisdom. I think, I mean, in earlier times, the commentators would say that means acceptance of the Vedas as absolute truth, as opposed to the Jains, as opposed to the Buddhists, the Charvaks, who are Nastikya. They don't believe in the Vedas. Having said that, I was just reading the other day Ramanuja's writing when he's debating with Shankar, and he was making the point. He was just saying, how can we know that the Vedas are infallible? He was raising that point in his debate with Shankar, making a very obvious point. If you take the Vedas as absolute evidence, how do you know that the Vedas themselves were not written by fallible human beings? But anyway, astikya means having faith and commitment to the spiritual endeavor and to the texts like Gita and Upanishads, seeing something in them at very least which is worthy of pursuit. So these lists: shamo, tranquility; dhamma, self-control; tapaha, austere living; tapas, shamo, dhamma, tapas. Shaucham, I missed out, is purity. Purity, shamo, dhamma, tapaha, shaucham, purity of body, purity of mind, being free from the nasty qualities like anger, hatred, greed, selfishness, malice, completely purified of those. Shamo, dhammas, tapaha, shaucham, kshantir, patience; arjivam, honesty, avicha; jnana, higher wisdom, derived from Upanishads and other texts; vijnana, practical, maybe ritualistic knowledge, knowledge of how to meditate, knowledge of how to worship; jnanam, vijnanam, astikyam, and faith, commitment to the spiritual endeavor, at least, perhaps even faith in the Vedas, Upanishads and Gita as a revelation of higher truths. Brahma Karma Svabhavajam. Okay, moving swiftly on, verse 43, which is about the Kshatriya. So what is the Kshatriya Svabhava like, the Kshatriya nature? Well, Shauryam, Tejo, Dritir, Daksho, Yudechapya Palayanam, Dhanam, Ishvar Bhavascha, Kshatram Karma Svabhavajam. So it's the same, almost the same last line, Kshatram Karma Svabhavajam. The karma of the kshatras, the actions that are performed by the kshatriya class, again, svabhavajam, born, dictated, arising from the inherent nature of such a person. And what is that? What are those actions that reflect the inner nature of kshatriya character types? Well, they're shaurya, courage, heroism, bravery in battle, and bravery in taking hard decisions as well. Sometimes ruling a kingdom, ruling a country requires bravery. It requires courage to do the right things. Too easy to do things that give you cheap popularity. Doing the right thing requires a degree of courage. And of course, as well, the Kshatriya is also the warrior class, so they need courage in battle, as we'll see here. Shauryam, Tejo is energy. Whilst the Brahmin is perhaps at home reading those hard books, browsing through his Vedanta Sutra commentaries, the Kshatriya is active, involved, not a lazy fellow, taking action all the time, planning, thinking about how to run the kingdom, influencing people, giving instructions, etc. It's a very, very hard job to be a Kshatriya. We read some of the best of the ancient kings. They were working 12 hours a day, constantly, little time for leisure and pleasure. Some of the lazy, useless Kshatriyas were just the opposite and let the kingdom go to rack and ruin. But Teja, activity, Tejas. So Shauryam Tejo, Shauryam Tejo, I forgot, mind went blank. Shauryam Tejo, Shauryam Tejo, Dritir. Always comes eventually. It's just that the little clockwork wheels in the head move a bit more slowly as you go, as you get older. Shauryam Tejo Dritir. Driti means determination, resolution, not a weak-minded person who gives up when things get a little difficult, because this Kshatriya vocation is demanding. We read about, you know, even today, political leaders of the best types. It's great demanding there. You've got to have resolution, commitment, energy, etc. Shauryam Tejo Dritya Daksha. And Daksha means expertise, competence. Daksha. Yes. Anyway. We don't want to get drawn into comparison with contemporary political leaders, but there's some for us living in Britain anyway, looking and thinking perhaps our political leaders could do with a little more daksha, competence, expertise, having the sharp mind to look at a problem, to analyse it, weigh up the pros and cons, and say this is the right decision. The decisions that have to be made in governance are very difficult. They have to balance the interests of different parties, and therefore daksha, expertise, is required. So Shauryam, Tejo, Driti, commitment, resolution, determination, daksha, expertise, competence to do it, the best class of minds, not anyway, that's enough of that. Dritya daksha, yude cha pyapalayanam, yude cha apalayanam. Yudha is a battle, a conflict. Yudhe means in conflict, on the battlefield. Cha apalayanam, never turning the face and running away, because the Kshatriyas are not just rulers and governors of the kingdoms, they are also the warrior class, the military people, and what is demanded of them then is courage. And particularly when we read in the Mahabharata the conflict at Kurukshetra, the great qualities of the best of the warriors is that they stand and face intense danger at all times. Sometimes not possible. There's a story, isn't there, of Yudhishthira, alas, when Karna attacks him, is forced to flee from the battlefield, shot through with Karna's arrows. But he's mortified by that as a Kshatriya, the fact that he was forced to leave the battlefield. He feels it's a mark of humiliation. And sometimes as well, there's other accounts in the Mahabharata Kurukshetra war where a warrior on his chariot will be so shot through, he'd pass out, and his charioteer will look at him and say, I've got to get him out of here, and gallop away and take him from the battlefield. And when the warrior comes round, he turns to his charioteer, what are you doing? What you did to me? Look at the indignity that you've wrought upon me. I should have stayed in the battle and fought. Therefore, Yude Chapalayanam, Yude Chapalayanam, never running away from battle. Yude Chapalayanam. what is that again? Shauryam tejo dritir daksha yude chapya palayanam dhanam ishvara bhavascha shatram karma svabhavajam. Dhanam is charity, and that again is a very significant point to political leaders of all ages. Of course, in the ancient times, in the Mahabharata times, in the life of Arjuna, the wealth of the rulers, they possessed wealth, but they always, it's part of their character, part of their duty is that any person who is destitute, in need, Brahmins who are living in poverty, the Kshatriya always gives whenever he is asked. Never you get a mean Kshatriya. Karna, perhaps again, is a great example of that, when Indra appeared before him in disguise and asked for his armor, his natural armor. Karna immediately removed it and gave it, because he has the Kshatriya Swabhav. Even though he's thought of as the son of a charioteer, the Kshatriya Swabhav shines through. Someone's asking me for something, it's the most precious thing to me that I possess, but still I'll give it away. And in the modern age, the same thing again. We don't often see this now, but political leaders shouldn't use their position just to live the life of luxury and enjoyment and pleasure. Like, again, I quite often read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and you see most of the empires were wretched fellows, emperors. They get the position of emperor usually by killing the previous one, and then as soon as they did, just absolute self-indulgence, disregard for the state of the empire, and then a few years later they get done in as well, and the next rogue and useless fellow would be appointed, and therefore we have the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Surprising it took that long, actually, but the idea is that the nature of the Kshatriya is to be entirely generous, always willing to give away as well. There's that story as well, I think it's in the Mahabharata, but certainly in Puranas, of Rantidev, who even cut off flesh from his own body to give to an eagle in order to save the life of the pigeon it was pursuing. Obviously it's a hyperbolic story, but it's making the point that generosity, giving is the nature of the Kshatriya. So Dhanam, and Ishvara Bhavas means, Bhava means the nature, like Swabhav, but having the personality of Ishwar, lordly. They have that disposition to rule and lead other people. They have to have what we would call, I think, leadership qualities. We might translate Ishwar Bhava as. Okay, so there we have it. Shauryam, courage, heroism. Shauryam, Tejo, energy. Dritya, determination, resolution. Daksha, expertise, competence. Yude apalayanam, never running away from battle. Dhanam, generous, always looking to give, to nurture the citizens, make sure everybody has whatever they need to live a prosperous life. No one is destitute, no one lives in poverty. Ishvara Bhavas, and having that leadership quality to them. Kshatriya karma svabhavajam. That's the nature, that's the activities, the duties of the Kshatriya class, and again svabhavajam, born of their nature. Gosh, we're going quite slowly, aren't we? Okay, and the third one is the next verse, which is 44, is the Vaishyas and Shudras, and only 3 things are given for the Vaishya karma: Krishi, Gauraksha, Vanijam, Vaishya karma svabhavajam. Again, it's the same thing, born of their nature, the business people. Krishi is agriculture, farming, growing things, crops, keeping animals, and Gauraksha. Interesting that this phrase, it means tending cows really, but the word raksha actually means protection. So Gauraksha doesn't just mean farming cows in the way that cows are farmed in the modern age with a no respect for the cows at all. They regarded really as commodities. How much wealth can I make from cows? And a lot of the time, even in the dairy industry, there's cruelty and slaughter. I think it's not really Gauraksha at all, and that's why a lot of people who at one time were vegetarian, just because they've gone to veganism, not because they necessarily think that that milk is wrong, but just because the dairy industry is so linked to the slaughter of calves, etc. And just by chance, yeah, there is a dairy in Britain actually, although it's hard to get anything from them that does Gauraksha. It's called the Himsa Dairies. Here it is. I get their catalogue because I'm a customer and a bit of a patron of them, and every so often they send a little bit of cheese, or you can buy cheese from them. It's not cheap, but it just feels better, because you know that Ahimsa dairies are doing Gauraksha. They are caring for the cows with a great deal of love, respect and veneration. In the Mahabharata, I'm just finished the Mahabharata course, actually it's starting in October, but one of the passages I focused on in the Mahabharata, in the Anushasan part of them, the 13th book, there's a whole passage about veneration, respect for cows, and why cows should be treated with the utmost respect and reverence there. And so I've taken out those passages just to have a look at what the Mahabharata says about Gauraksha. It's really, I was reading it out actually to Diane, my wife, and she came in and I said, what do you think about this? I sometimes do. And she just said, oh, that's lovely. That's so lovely. That mood of veneration, love, respect for the cows, which is so different from the modern farming industry, isn't it? Which just regards cows as a way of making more and more money and prosperity. Anyway, I'll say no more on that, but anyway, it's interesting that the Bhagavadgītā's view of the Vaishya karma uses that specific word raksha, which means nurturing, protecting, guarding, so that it becomes a symbiotic relationship between humans and cows, and not the exploitative parasitic relationship that we tend to have with cows as well. I would say as well, of course, you probably, maybe some of you know this, but the word go, which is the Sanskrit word for a cow, is also used for the earth. And I think I've made the point in discussing those passages that the attitude towards cows of one of pure exploitation is also there with regard to the earth, and the idea of nurturing of cows at a microcosmic level, perhaps at a macrocosmic level, applies to our relationship with the earth, which so often is exploitative, which is why we've got to this awful position now, just take without any sense of reverence or respect for the earth. So the idea of Gauraksha has a much wider implication, I think. But anyway, I don't want to go too far off the subject, but it's something that plays on my mind while I was working on those passages. So Krishi, agriculture in general, Gauraksha, nurturing cows, Vanijam, a Vanik is a merchant, a trader, a business person. So those are the three things: agriculture, tending cows, and business transactions, buying and selling and making money as well. Vaishya karma svabhavajam. And then paricharyatmakam karma. Paricharyatmaka means working for others, assisting others, offering service to others, tradesmen, skilled craftspeople, etc. Those who work in businesses, do the labouring, etc. That is the Shudras activities. What is that? Paricharyatmakam karma. Forgotten. Sorry, there's a little boy peering through the window at me from behind. I can see him on the screen. He's distracting me. Paricharyatmakam karma, Shudras ya. Gone there. Excuse me. Paricharyatmakam karma. Shudras Yapis Svabhavajam, and of the Shudras, that is their action, and that is again a reflection of their Svabhav, their character, their natural propensities. It's not, I don't think that the Brahmins are great and wonderful and the Shudras are just rubbish, low-class human beings at all. The whole point of the system as it's conceived of in this early period is that when people work in accordance with their natural tendencies and abilities, then the whole of society, the whole of the community benefits. It's very stable, it's very ordered. Everybody is contributing in their own way towards the common good. And that's, I think, the underlying principle behind Varna Dharma, that the prosperity, the stability of society and community promotes the well-being of all living beings. And Krishna in the Mahabharata defines Dharma as that which brings prosperity to all living beings. It's what promotes the welfare of all living beings. In that historical period, the Varna system functioned apparently, from what we hear from the early texts, very well in promoting the common good. I think over the centuries then it's degenerated, it's become used as a justification for caste-based oppression, abuse, etc. But the original idea remains unchanged. The original idea is that each individual has a responsibility to society as a whole. So if we think about how I work, my role in life, my vocation, my occupation, it's not just about how am I going to get very rich and enjoy like anything. It's how is society going to benefit from my own contribution. And I think that that's the important point that's underlying this. And of course that again is very much inherent in the idea of karma yoga, and as Krishna says, Lokasangraham evapi sampasyan kartamahasi. Lokasangraham sampasyan, thinking only of the benefit of the world, the good of the world. Lokasangraha kartamarhasi, you must take action. So in a sense now Krishna's led us forward from the gunas via the Varna system. Now for the next, we're up to 45 to 49, it's his revisiting of karma yoga. So he starts off with, and I thought we might get a bit further today, but I've got sidetracked too much, sorry about that. But he says, now then, Svesve karmanyabhirataha sangsiddhim labhatenaraha. A person, nara, a man, sangsiddhim labhate, attains sangsiddhi. Labhate means achieves or attains. And what does he attain? Sangsiddhi, perfection, or at least success. And Svesve karman yabhirataha. By abhirata means dedication, devotion. Svesve karman, to each of his own, to each their own particular karma, their own school of activity. Krishna's now, you can see the development into karma yoga, because by devoting yourself to the performance of your svabhavajam karma, your activities, one can achieve perfection by following these duties, by engaging in activity for the benefit of the whole society. So, svesve karma nyabhirataha sangsiddhim labhatenara. A person attains all success in life, attains perfection. And Krishna's not talking here about the mundane idea of perfection, of samsiddhi, which means getting rich and living in a big house and driving a, I don't know, Bentley or something like that, car around. That's not what he means by sangsiddhi. He means the fullness of the human potential, which is, of course, in the view of the Gita, overwhelmingly spiritual. So svesve karmani abhirataha, by dedicating each to his own particular branch of activity, sangsiddhim labhatenaraha. A person achieves sangsiddhi, perfection in life, the goal of life. Sangsidim labateinaraha. Swakarma nirata hasidim yata vindati Tachtrinu. So you can see Krishna often starts a new phase in his teaching with that phrase, Tachtrinu, which means just listen. Shrin, it's the verb to hear. Now just hear how it is that a person can achieve that perfection by swakarmana, through pursuing his own duties. Because you might say, well, yeah, it's good to live in society, and if you're a skilled craftsman carving or making statues, or if you're good with agriculture or business, yeah, that's fine, that's a contribution to social welfare, but it's not spiritual. Is that going to bring Sangsiddhi? Well, let's hear. And this is interesting as well. How can that be, that performing duties in this way, meritorious as they are, brings that state of Sangsiddhi, the ultimate goal of life? And then in the next verse, which is 46, there seems to be a sudden change of tack, because he starts off by saying, Yataha prabhritir bhutanam. Yataha, from whom? Or from which, but here from whom perhaps. Prabhritir bhutanam, there is the prabhriti, the progression, the coming into being, the coming into existence of living beings. So he from whom living beings come into existence. Yataha prabhritir bhutanam. Yena sarvamidam tatam. He by whom sarvamidam, sarvam means all, idam means this, all this world, tatam here, pervaded. So he was talking about doing your activities previously. Now suddenly he started talking about something theological. Yataha prabhritir bhutanam, from whom all living beings come into existence. Yena sarvamidam tatam, by whom this whole world is pervaded. We're back in chapter 9 again, all of a sudden a jump. Now, but swakarmana tamabhyarcha. Swakarmana, through your swakarma, through your personal duty, swakarmana tamabhyarcha, him, abhyarcha, worshipping him. Archa means the worshipful object. We know the murti in the temple is called the archa vigraha, the worshipful form, if you like. So worshipping him, how? Swakarmana, by performing your duties in that way. That is an act of worship, in a sense, of the one from whom all beings come into existence, the one by whom this whole world is pervaded. By performing your duties, it becomes an act of worship. Swakarmana tamabhyacha siddhim vindati manavaha. Manavaha, a person, a human being, siddhim vindati, attains that perfection. So the explanation is, how can you achieve Sangsiddhi just by doing your duty? You make your duties an act of worship. And I know we're getting to time, but I did want to make a couple of points about this, because first of all, and we've had hints of this before, but it's a very clear statement here, that karma yoga, as it was first, when karma yoga was first taught, it was very much about you, your duty, your own motives, your own state of consciousness, being desireless, free of attachment. Now karma yoga is being moved into the realm of bhakti, that the karma yoga that you did without selfish desire, now Krishna is saying, doing it abhyarcha, for the supreme deity from whom the world has appeared, by whom the world has is pervaded. Your karma, swakarma, your designated duties become an act of worship. So at this point, it has been hinted at before in chapter 3 verse 30. We've heard about doing duties as an act of worship. But it's in this verse, which is verse 47, isn't it, of chapter 18, we get a clear indication. I think it's quite an important verse for that reason, in understanding the progression of ideas in the Bhagavad Gita. We're seeing what started off as karma yoga, just about yourself and the way you live in the world, your motives, your state of mind. Now that's being drawn in, if you like, to the domain of bhakti. It's being represented as being a form of devotion. Your actions, your life is an act of devotion in and of itself. And it reminded me, and I'll just finish on this point, of some verses I read some time ago now in the Shiv Puran. And I've mentioned these before. Of course, this is Shaivite devotion, but I find that the teachings on Shaivite Bhakti are virtually identical to the Bhagavadgītā's ideas on Bhakti. I won't read the Sanskrit, I'll just read translations of them. And this is what it says. They understand worship of Shiva, Shivaradhana, it's the phrase used in this verse. They understand worship of Shiva to consist of freeing all beings from fear, showing kindness to all beings, and providing assistance to all beings. This is bhakti. As in this world, a father is pleased when his sons, grandsons, and others are made happy, so Shiva becomes pleased when happiness is given to any living being. Similarly, if harm is done to any living being, this act is displeasing to Ashtamurti Shiva. There is no doubt about this. What those verses from the Shiva Purana are saying is that the righteous activities we're doing, the giving, the nurturing, the assistance, the kindness, the dedication to the well-being of others, yes, they are punya. They are virtuous, righteous activities. They bring good karma. But what Krishna is saying here, and what the Shiva Purana is saying perhaps more clearly, is that those acts are not just punya, and the phrase used we find is Shiva punya. It's punya, it's righteous activity, it's virtuous living, it's living to help, to provide sustenance and nurture for those who are in unfortunate positions. So it is punya. But what Krishna is saying here in the Gita is that that punya becomes Shiva punya. It becomes an act of bhakti as well. So we see karma yoga and bhakti become one and the same thing. And that's, I think, an important point in understanding the overall progression of ideas in the Bhagavad Gita. And it's been made particularly clear. If I ever want to make that point when I'm writing, this is the verse I always quote to show that karma yoga and bhakti are not two distinctive paths, as is sometimes said. We've got karma yoga, we've got bhakti yoga. In fact, as we can see from this, karma yoga and bhakti yoga are inextricably linked together, and they become, in this verse, one and the same thing. Yataha pravritir bhutanam, he from whom living beings come forth into existence. Yena sarvamidam tatam, he by whom this whole world is pervaded, everything is the energy and expansion of the existence of the divine. Swakarmana tamabhyarcha, worshipping him swakarmana, through the righteous dharmic deeds that one does. Swakarmana tamabhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha, a person thereby achieves perfection in life, all success in life, so that the punya, the righteous activities, become Shiva punya or Krishna punya. They become offerings of devotion, and the most potent offerings of devotion, more than the flowers, the leaves, the water, the garlands, etc. The offering of help, assistance, kindness to other living beings is the sweetest offering, according to the Shiv Puran. This is the essence of Shivaradhana, of devotion to Shiva. So piety, virtue, dharma becomes bhakti, is bhakti when it's understood in that way. And I'm 5 minutes over time, so we'll have to finish there. And I regret to say not really, but I'm going on my holidays again tomorrow. I'm going across to Guernsey, a small island in the English Channel, which is very quiet, very peaceful place, and I find a little solitude out there, a little bit away from the hustle and bustle of the city. But it does mean that the next 2 weeks we won't be having the talks. So we will resume in on the, I think it's the 24th of August, and we haven't got that far to go now, because we're up to 47 today, wasn't it? I think. 47 we got up to. So I think there's only there's 31 verses left, so we're getting towards the end of the of the Bhagavadgītā, and that will be, well, anyway, with that in mind, thanks very much for listening in week after week, and special thanks to the Wellingborough group who first of all persuaded me to start off doing this. It's been a long time getting through the Gita, and I was a little reluctant at first, but it's been a privilege so far, and so thanks very much. Anyway, I will speak again actually in 3 weeks' time, and I hope you'll be able to listen in then. Anyway, have a good night. Thanks very much for listening. Namaste.